I want to thank Steve Norsini and Dennis Capella. Steve is our engineer. And Dennis, I guess you're the project manager on this? You're on mute. Sorry.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I was going to answer for him if he didn't.
So we do have a hard stop at 5:45 because we need the bandwidth for another meeting. So let's start the meeting, and Steve, if you can take it away and give a little presentation and answer some questions, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So I do want to thank everybody. I'm very happy to see the amount of people we have on here. That's fantastic. So thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy day. I'll wave to your son. Thank you very much. And so what I'm going to do, let me share my screen. So I never have a problem with Teams, but for some reason I struggle with Zoom. So let me see how this works here. So are you able to see, this is the letter that went out. Are you folks able to see that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Great. So I inserted this little Google picture. So a few years back, we met with a couple residents due to there's some ponding in here, some puddling that occurs. And in the summertime, it just lingers there. And there was concern with mosquito-borne diseases, right? Because it just sits there when it's 95 degrees. We would actually see, you know, the green algae growing in there. This was just to make it easier for folks that aren't used to reading plans. So what we did when this problem occurred, we got authorization from the board we use consultants to do the vast majority of our designs. T&M was contracted. And what we do is we bring them out and say, hey, look, here's our problem. We don't try to come in with preconceived notions. We just try to take a look at it from a broad basis. And we say, okay, here's our problem. We have this ponding here. We need to get rid of it. And we evaluate several options. And then we look at it and say, okay, what would be the most efficient, the best use of taxpayer dollars to take care of this very specific problem? And what we came up with was, in the area of the ponding, we would install an inlet, and then that would get piped down to the existing inlet down by Mr. D'Onofrio. Also, for good measure, and it could be used, we're planning on installing another inlet here. So let me take you to the plan set, because this makes it a little easier. And let me get rid of all our pictures that are in the way. Hang on a sec. Okay. So I'm going to blow this up a little bit. So this is Arthur Road, obviously. This is the cul-de-sac. These are the existing conditions. So when we come down a little closer to look at this, and let me make this a little larger.
Ian, can you mute them? Thanks.
So some of these names may have changed because we actually designed this a few years back, and these projects weren't funded, and now it's funded. So again, here's that inlet that would be installed along the curb. It's piped to a manhole, comes down to here and goes in that existing inlet and the pipe through, and then another inlet here. This shaded area is, so during this type of construction, the contractor is going to come in, they're going to install this pipe, this manhole, and this inlet, and there's a trench in the road that they restore. But we're following our own ordinance. So for a project of this type, with this much disturbance in the road, the contractor is required to mill this area and repave this. I'm going to add another twist to it all. Aqua Pennsylvania has talked to us. They would like to come in and redo the water line here. So I told them, we don't want you to interfere with this project, and you can't be on the road at the same time with our contractor. They're just, nobody would be able to move. So I'm going to work with them on timing for when they come in, and they too are going to be required once I see their plan. So if they were to install water line up this side of the road, they're going to have to mill and resurface the road also. So as a third step, whenever a utility or a project goes through a road, we look at that road to see if it should be put on, in this case, the 2022 resurfacing program to basically take all the areas that have been milled and resurfaced or any open areas and pave the whole street. So we've been doing that as a follow-up. So as projects are done by Aqua or Pico in year X plus one is usually when we try to go in and resurface behind them. So I'm just going to open it up to anybody with any questions. We're here for you.
Steve, could I just ask the first question and then turn it over? So it looks like you're going to be piping the water uphill?
No, so this does run downhill. This inlet is at a low spot, so it's going to get piped downhill to here.
Okay, because I thought that the beginning of Arthur is higher than
Right, coming down the other way, but this area, I mean, it's not a steep grade, but it does flow down there.
Okay, that was it. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to start. Also, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I actually requested the Zoom meeting because the flooding in the street is kind of like in the movie Rashomon, where everybody has a different perspective of the same, event. But in case, instead of a murder, it's really flooding, systemic flooding in the street. So the way I got involved in it was after the North Wayne flooding in 2018. I was the only neighbor that came to the township to request funding to deal with flooding in the street. And it gets really bad. What isn't really mentioned is the broader environmental factors that go into this. So this street essentially is like a toilet bowl. And all the water comes from County Line Road all the way down to the one existing inlet. The existing inlet was, I think, built in like the 1930s. Actually, it's on our like lease, not lease,
Easement.
easement.
Yeah.
So this is a 100-year-old line that's past its service life. And I know it's past its service life because former Commissioner Schaefer, she helped us when our basement flooded with all the fluent from County Line Road all the way down. So what I want to do is kind of like talk about the systemic issues that's going on. We're going to be digging up this whole street at like kind of like the bad time. Right now it's like COVID and people are thinking about, they have different priorities. And I personally requested the plans over a year ago. I sent an email to Commissioner Fari and he forwarded to Mr. Mussini saying that I would like to see the plans to comment. Because what happened was the neighbors did not see the design study. It was $12,000, $13,000. The neighbors did not see the actual proposed design, which could have been emailed out as a PDF instead of like a little bitmapped graphic on a flyer. And then neighbors could have been involved in the bid selection process, and we weren't. So I think this is the time for everybody in the neighborhood to get together and find out a good holistic Catholic in the broad sense solution for the systemic flooding issues on the street. And we can't be kicking the can down the road where you have a bunch of water, it's accumulating in the cul-de-sac. It's getting shunted back to our existing line, and we're building two inlets that are
sorry, I'm on the Zoom, what?
Yes, you are.
I'll pause for a second. Yeah, so all the water is getting shunted back to a very old line, and there's no talk about what's going to happen to that line. And what I'm worried about is that we're going to overwhelm the line, and it has failed, and it's past its service life because a ramjet needs to come at least once a year just to get it to work. And I think there's a chance for everybody in the street to get their input in it and make it better. Like, for example, we're going to be milling half the road, not the full road. And there's no talk about why the street's flooding. It's been overpaved. So the street is the same elevation as the sidewalks. And you mentioned ponding, but there's a public realm element to the resolution, which is the sidewalk, and the water is careening over the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Let's, you know, I don't want this to be a gripe session of what happened in the past. If you have specific questions, let's let the engineer answer it. I just, you know, because you can go on, and I don't doubt anything that you're saying. I just want to have a chance that everybody can ask questions. Do you have anything specific? I mean, when it comes to the sidewalks, like, these are valid things, just
Okay, Mr. Nusrini, I have a question.
Sure.
Fanny Donofrio. You adding two inlet to the existing inlet, which is very old, hasn't been renovated. Do you think you're going to burden the line? Because he has failed in the past.
great question. Great question.
That is a good question, and thank you for that. So I'd like to answer that, and then I'd like to address some of Mr. D'Onofrio's points as we go down. So when our consultant looked at this, he saw no issue with the capacity of the existing line with this. And this ties into some of Mr. D'Onofrio's concerns. So first off, and I apologize why, I don't recall the email, but I apologize if something wasn't sent out. So the whole impetus for this project was not a flood mitigation project by any means. It was for the ponding in the street. We met with the resident there. There's actually grading issues behind the curb and back into the yard that we were very clear wouldn't be addressed. It was solely to address what was in the street. So if everybody tells me that flooding outside of very severe events is a big issue on the street, that's why we did this. And I did not get that from the folks we talked to about flooding in the street.
Can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I live at 14 Arthur Road, and no one came by to talk to me, so I don't know who you talked to. But when we have strong rainfall, and that can happen anytime,
Yes.
the condos that are behind my home on 14 Arthur Road and behind the Brady home, the side of the street that is on the east side of Arthur Road, we get torrents of rain flooding our properties from the condos. All of their conduits for water come up out of the ground and just flood us.
So
And that is the extra water that is being absorbed. I've spent at least $20,000 on 2 retaining walls to stop some of that. But and I've taken photos of it. You wouldn't believe it's a fast moving stream that comes right down from those condos. Now, the Bradys some time ago hired a lawyer and checked out all of the plans for those condos, which were very different in terms of the plans that are in the township office that were approved by the township and what they actually did. And so remediation via what has happened is when those condos were built, that water was directed right at our properties. And that's where, at the end of the cul-de-sac, an extraordinary amount of water happens just during a heavy rainfall, not a cataclysmic storm or hurricane, but we have that extra water that just runs like a torrent down the backyard. No one asked us about that, but that's where much of the water that comes into the cul-de-sac currently occurs.
So I don't know, we may have spoken because I did speak to some folks in the cul-de-sac, but I do need to distinguish a couple of things here. So there's no doubt, I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. So the issue with the condominiums, that flow that comes from there is somewhat different than what we're dealing with here. And I'm not saying that it's not a huge issue to your home, but usually township projects don't involve taking the runoff from one property that's not in the street or connected to the street or part of a township property and addressing it to your home. Now, I would, if the Bradys want to share what their attorneys found with, I don't know what that was.
But see, this is what I'm trying to say is the water flows through our properties And Fanny and Mark know that when it goes down the Brady driveway, that's what floods that one sewer, right, Mark?
Yeah,
Yes,
And overflows to your yard. It's an enormous amount of water. It's not coming down the street from the top of Arthur Road. It's coming from behind our homes all the way down. And there's nowhere for it to go, but it rushes down that driveway, right? And right into that only sewer there, which is right in front of your property.
So then I'd like to ask, so I'm going to give you an example. So my home, I am at the lower end of an older 15 lot subdivision. So in a decent rain, not a cataclysmic event, a decent rain, I have two rivers that run through my property and they dump out on the street. So from a township perspective, and I don't live in Radnor Township, I live right over the line. So from a township perspective, my township's not going to address that runoff that's coming through my property because that's coming from other homes. So I'm going to ask for some clarification. Are you asking us to address the water once it hits the street or prior to getting to your homes? Because we're here to help you, but they are two different issues.
I think what we originally planned and with Mark and also Rich Schwartz was that there would be an additional storm sewer at the end of the cul-de-sac on the western side of the road.
Like in here?
I thought that there is going to be another inlet there, that there are two proposed inlets. One will be
Okay.
in cul-de-sac with a manhole, and one will be in front of my house. I'm a Brady. And at some
Correct.
point, I have specific questions about that.
Right.
This is Mayor Brady talking.
So let me go down Mr. D'Onofrio's list a little bit. Just I don't want to let that go because it's fresh in everybody's mind. So like I said, this wasn't a flood reduction project or some big infrastructure project. It was the sole issue was that ponding. I do understand what Mr. D'Onofrio is saying about the broader look. And he had brought up to me previously about digging up the street during COVID and that residents were worried about workers that are going to be out there during COVID. We do have requirements for those workers to follow the guidelines that are set up. So as far as the bid selection process for a project, that's something that can't be decided by staff or by the public. So all our bids are done. They're called sealed bids. So we use an electronic bidding site. It's called Pen Bid. So the plans and specifications are posted. Contractors become members of Pen Bid. Their questions come in through Pen Bid. They're answered. Everybody sees all the questions and all the answers. And in the end, it goes to the Board of Commissioners. And the township is legally required to take the lowest responsible bidder, meaning the bidder. And when we say responsible, they're the ones that have, filled out everything correctly, filled out a proper bid, their references check out, all that good stuff.
can I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
Okay, so what happened was there's $100,000 appropriated for this project.
Mhm.
And none of the neighbors were able to see the design. And what is kind of missing and a lost opportunity is that we should have been having this discussion beforehand to include different issues and concerns. I mean, obviously we have a legitimate concern. You have a 100-year-old pipe and you're shunting water from two different inlets that can get blocked. This street is full of leaves during the fall, and during the winter, you're gonna have a snowbank over that other inlet at the end of the street. And I just know as a contractor, if you go from a 2x3, like say downspout, to a 3x4, you're increasing the volume by 100%. And this is an older line. And since I don't need to make a forecast, I know the weather, the past weather, and the line failed. So what I don't want to have happen Is that the
Well, I do have to jump in for a second. So there is a difference between a line failing and a line being clogged. And I think we need to make that distinction. So a line failing would be it collapsed, it separated, something along those lines. A line getting clogged with debris is a very different item. And on that, and I just want everybody to understand, on a project that we really consider a very small project to fix a very specific problem is not usually something we would bring out through the whole neighborhood. It was a very specific issue we were called out for, and it was a very specific solution. So the solution, what Mr. D'Onofrio brings up, and the Brady's and Ms. Wall, that's a bigger issue, which we weren't aware of flooding. And I don't know that it's flooding or the inability of the inlet to handle that rush of water or the leaves, as Mr. D'Onofrio says. So our public works guys are fantastic. And they actually do go out and clean inlets before storms. And they do their best to make sure that inlets aren't covered by snow when they're plowing in a cul-de-sac. And we would let them know this inlet is there. And just for everybody's benefit, if you're ever concerned about an impending storm and you feel that the inlets are clogged all around you, just call 610-688-5600, extension 155, and you let Leah know and she'll take care of that. But let me go back down the list. So again, Mr. D'Onofrio noted the line has failed. So failure would mean the line broke, it collapsed. So I don't believe we have a failure issue. I believe we have a clogging issue. And that's what Mr. D'Onofrio mentioned when the line gets jetted. The curbing, it's a good point. The curbing, Mr. D'Onofrio is spot on. After years and years of resurfacing, the asphalt existing is near the top of the curb. Something we see in a lot of different roads and a lot of different townships over the years. With regard to the money that was budgeted, that was brought up. So when I ask for monies for a budget for a project, I'm doing it before it's even designed. So I don't know, I'm not asking for funds for this specific project. I'm asking for funds for a project. And I'm looking at what may have to be done. So the reason those funds were budgeted so high was there was a lot of uncertainty. Were we going to have to add another pipe? Were we going to be replacing that pipe that Mr. D'Onofrio is talking about? Were we going to have to obtain easements? And what was it going to cost to get those easements? And what restoration would be required for those easements? And what would additional pipe cost? So that's why that number was like that. But we do have a responsibility to the taxpayers of the township as a whole to spend what we need for the project and not necessarily what is there. So I just want everybody to be sure, and I might have put it in the letter, very specifically, this is not a flood reduction project. It is not a big infrastructure project. It is actually a very small project to address a specific item. And that's why we don't necessarily go door to door. If we were looking at a project that was street-wide, where we were going to be replacing curbs and adding inlets and ripping up the street in its entirety, that would be a very, very different conversation. We would be sending mailers out to everybody. We would be going through those steps. So I just want to let everybody know that's why a project of this magnitude is not necessarily one we go door to door on. And also it sat for some time awaiting funding, which it finally got. So I'm sorry, I think I went down Mr. D'Onofrio's questions, and I don't want to monopolize things. As the commissioner said, we have a limited time frame, so I do want to open it back up to any questions.
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'm Rhea Brady, and I live where I believe the inlet's going to be in front of my property.
Yeah, it's right about
And
there.
Right, and I wish I understood where that was exactly. And this is why there are two massive sycamore trees that are in that area. And I'm concerned, I just want to understand how they'll be affected by all this digging, whether the root systems will be ruined. I mean, if they were to be compromised where they would fall or have to come down, they are massive trees. And I also want to make sure that the inlet is, placed at the part where it's going to catch the most water. Another concern because of those two trees, and I'd like to state that although there is water coming from the condos, because we unfortunately are a low area and the water's running down, I do not want to let you guys underestimate the amount of water that is coming from County Line Road. I mean, that hill, there's lots of water that comes down. And the sidewalk too, as well as the road, water shoots and skates and sheets. That's the word I want to use, sheets down that sidewalk. Unfortunately, when it hits a point on my property, the sycamores are so large over the years that they've been growing that the sidewalk is graded so that it has to go up to go over some of those roots. So you've got all this water coming down, and then you've got a place where the sidewalk now is gradually going back up, and water flows over. At that point, it can't run up the hill, up the sidewalk hill, as it were. It's not a hill exactly, but up, and it will sheet over the grass and into the street. So I'd be very curious whether there'd be a way that that inlet could take that water, that's coming from the sidewalk and make sure it appropriately gets into the street. And where that inlet is exactly, and if there's any way to ameliorate the effect on the trees.
Well, there are two great questions. So I got to thank Mr. D'Onofrio. He had brought the tree issue up earlier. So I'm going to be having the township uses a contracted arborist. His name is John Rockwell Hosback, and he's an independent arborist. He's not a tree surgeon, and we use him for very objective views on trees. So there's no gain for him if a tree stays or remains. He's there to give an objective view based on the arboricultural data that he uses. So I am going to bring him out, and I want to ask him what the impact would be. Actually, I believe we had him out way back, but it's been, like I say, it's been like 3 or 4 years. So we're going to bring him back out and take a look at these trees. Now, if he tells me that, Steve, I think the installation of this inlet is not going to be deleterious to these trees, that's great. If he tells me, I think the inlet installation will cause harm to those trees, then we would talk to you and say, okay, based on what our arborist said, here's the situation. And I don't know what that situation would be. He might say it could bring it into earlier decline. He might say it's fine. He might say it's going to cause irreparable damage and they need to come down. So we would then look at that. So one of the issues with your sidewalk is because of the tree roots, the way it's humped up it's pushed up the sidewalk. That's part of the problem. That raised area that you spoke of. So what we don't want to do is go in and cut all the tree roots to make the sidewalk flat. But in the meantime, there's a situation there that isn't good. Add all to that we don't want to willy-nilly just remove a beautiful heritage tree. It begs for further investigation, which is what we're going to do.
Okay.
And once I bring the arborist out, I'll probably have him talk to the Brady's with me, so that he'll give me a report. But if you had more questions, he can answer them. And like I say, this is all he does is these objective reviews of trees.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the determination of the responsibility of this arborist rules that this will not be a problem for the trees. And during the implementation of this project, the trees begin to have issues. I feel a lot more comfortable if that were well-defined before action were taken.
So we're not going to do anything until the arborist comes out, and you're going to be able to see his report just as I do, right? And you'll be able to ask questions. And again, not being an arborist, I don't know what his determination will be. And he's very thorough, and he's also very much a risk assessor, right? So he's also looking at risk, he's looking at the tree, but he's looking at risk assessment. So if there's a concern from him that if we do this work and in X years, he feels the tree will fail because of that, he would let us know up front, and then we'd have to say, okay, then what you're saying is, if we do this work, this is going to be the consequence. We're not going to let that happen. We would address the tree. We would remove the tree. But we're not going to do that unless we talk with you and share his findings with you and let you ask him questions.
Okay, that's the scope of my question for the moment.
I'll just add one thing. When it comes to trees, especially big trees, and especially big trees in our ward, if they're going to come down, people are going to know. There was an incident, what I call northern old oaks, maybe on Rodney. I don't know, Steve, are you familiar with that incident that happened?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. Contractor came in and just cut one tree down, and you got calls pretty quickly. So in light of trees coming down, I know Mr. D'Onofrio, you spoke about trees coming down prior at a meeting. We're very cognizant. The commissioners are cognizant, and Shade Tree is cognizant, and if there are questions, we can vet this through Shade Tree as well.
And just so everybody's aware, so the vast majority of notification I get about somebody taking down trees comes from our residents, right? So there'll be a concerned resident who calls and says, hey, I see contractor X at this address removing trees. And we'll check to see if their permit was approved, if it needed to go to Shade Tree, did it not? In some cases, they're perfectly able to do what they wish to do. In other cases, as the one that Commissioner noted, we went out, stopped the contractor, and we are addressing that. So yes, trees are very important to Radnor Township. We're one of the townships that has a shade tree commission. Not everybody does. And I think just in general, we are a Tree City USA. And in general, folks in Radnor Township are very concerned about the canopy, as are we. So we would never just willy-nilly remove a tree. We would never just leave it there if we thought we damaged it. So I want the Brady's to fully understand when I bring that arborist in, you will be in the, I'm not going to say part of the discussion, you will be in the discussion with him and me on this.
And if you need to loop me in, if you feel more comfortable having me being looped in, I'm happy to be part of that conversation.
Hey, Steve, this is Rich Shores. I'm at 16 Arthur. I just wanted to confirm, after this project, then Aqua's going to come in, and then this entire street will be on the list to be repaved. I just know that, look at County Line, how poorly streets become if you just do half.
So yeah, so what the plan would be, and I don't have their plans yet, because when I notified them, they're like, okay, we're going to back off. So depending on their timeline, and they could push it to 2022. So at a minimum, the way our project's designed is to have this paved. So our requirement for these road openings, if let's say Aqua comes right down this side, they're required to solely address the side they're on. Again, until I look at their plans, but what we tell the commissioners is after a project goes in with any utility, we go back with the intent the following year to resurface the whole road. So you don't have this piece that was done in 2021, this piece that was done in 2022. And also, I don't know how much they're going to affect what we've done, right? I don't know if they're going to be digging through. I know one thing's for sure, they're going to be connecting the water line services. So at one point, there will be some cross. So then we could speak to Aqua. Do we look at holding off on doing our section of the road and wait until they're done, and then it's a larger project. But I won't know that. I'm actually meeting with Aqua Monday. I'm just looking at my calendar. I'm meeting with Aqua Monday, and I'm going to get more specifics on that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, this is Joe Silver. I'm at 17 Arthur Road.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about the timeline of when this is slated to begin and what we're in for here in the coming weeks and months, and what
Sure.
we're looking at. Yeah.
So the project was awarded by the Board of Commissioners. We haven't met with the contractor to determine a start date or the duration. I can tell you that the amount of pipe work, barring any issues, and I think somebody had said, 100-year-old infrastructure. So as well as these projects get laid out and we call in our one calls to make sure we know what's in the ground and that we can get past everything. In our older neighborhoods, on occasion, we'll find a utility or a pipe that was not marked and we don't know ownership or something like that. So those types of things can throw a wrench into the schedule. But in general, what you would see is, the contractor would most likely start in this location. He may come and tie this inlet in. If that inlet goes in, he would come up the street. So what that entails very specifically, there would be a hydraulic excavator or a backhoe. There would be a dump truck that as they excavate for the pipe, the spoil goes into the dump truck. That's taken off site. Brought back in is stone. So they're going to have some piles of stone over here. So I don't try to sugarcoat anything to anybody. I try to be as truthful and objective as I can be, which is what we're supposed to be, right? And I will tell you, yes, it will be an inconvenience for the folks basically who live anywhere past this point, because there'll be a machine here excavating and there'll be a truck here. So we're going to have to make sure they have a person, a flagger that can say, okay, here comes a car. We got to move. We got to let you through, because the road, even though our pipe is very much against the western side, you still have a dump truck here. So if it's possible to keep the one lane open and just put cones there, that would be the optimal thing. And we just need somebody to direct traffic, literally. If it sticks too far out and we can't get cars through here, we're going to have the truck move to allow folks to go in. And what we would do is get everybody a start time and a completion time. And the usual hours of work are going to be around 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3:30. So a lot of folks will say, fine, I'm going to park down here, or I'm going to scoot out before they get here. But we would provide that information prior to any work being done.
Steve, if I may add, that this contractor is familiar with working in the township, and even if he wasn't, we emphasize the need to do all of the things that you mentioned. So, and we will do that.
And we're going to have
also-
an inspector on the project.
Right.
So that inspector is also our eyes and ears, and we will make sure the residents know who the inspector is. I go to the sites almost daily, but my eyes and ears are the inspector. So we would make sure you folks know who our inspector is. They wear a vest that says QCI, and you would be able to go to them at any time with any concern, and what they can't answer a question, the call will come back to us and we would address it.
I'll just say real quick, with the Conestoga Road, that underpass, you got that done well ahead of schedule. So when that can happen, I know that Steve and the rest of the staff, they push to do so. So no one wants this to be a burden on your lives and your day-to-day course of activity. So we push, and I know that Steve he does a great job pushing to make sure that this is done in a timely manner, because it is an
Thank you.
inconvenience for everybody.
Underpass below the Norristown High Speed Line Bridge.
Yeah,
Oh, Steve, thank you for getting that one out
yeah.
of the way. quickly.
That was supposed to be done like December 12th,
Yeah.
and you got it done right.
Week or two.
Yeah, and you got it done 2.5 weeks early, right? maybe
It was,
more.
it was about almost 3 weeks, yes.
Yeah, so like that was awesome. Like they push. I mean, they, you know, our staff is great. Seriously.
Mr. Nosini,
Yes,
Fanny
ma'am.
Donofrio, 15 Arthur Road. Just a quick comment. In my opinion, this is significant renovation. This is not small, and I wish you could have told us a little bit before. You have communicated, because we are actually like disproportionately affected. We're putting stress on the only line, only man in a street. Plus, it's like the digging. Some of the people who are not vaccinated, so we're relying on delivery for food, for medication. So it's a double jeopardy for us. So I am concerned.
And I understand that concern wholeheartedly. And what I will tell you is we will never turn a resident or a delivery away, right? So for the folks that get deliveries, I'm not saying there might not be a few minutes of shuffling to get the car or to get Amazon or whoever is delivering through. Just like in any construction project, you know, when the lane is restricted, you may have to wait, but we would absolutely make sure everybody or any delivery van gets through, whether that's an Amazon or food delivery, or for those of you that may be on oil heat or something like that. I mean, that will always occur. We will always make sure that gets addressed for sure.
And on the expediency, the contractor has been submitting paperwork. He would like to meet with us, but he wants to try to get all the paperwork squared away so that he could hit the ground running when we're ready to go. So we're hoping that he'll follow through quickly on everything.
And that when these things are all submitted, that's really when the schedule comes into play, because in a project like this, so there's material submittals for the inlet, the manhole, and the other inlet and the pipe. And then these inlets are precast. So there's, from the time it's approved, he submits that to his concrete precaster, and they have to wait for their production schedule to make it. I mean, none of this stuff is out of the ordinary, but it does have to be made. So that would play a part in it, very much so.
Thanks.
And
I guess I would just want to express that I agree with Fanny and share that concern that, you know, if this project could be pushed a few months down the road, I'm sure, I mean, speaking for myself, that it would not be something I would have an issue with. I do see, you know, vaccination we're hoping is coming soon, and so I guess just from our perspective, there's no rush to begin, I guess would be our plea.
So can I ask a question to the residents as a whole? Is this something everybody would like to see pushed back?
Yes.
Yes.
We
It's okay
vote
with us.
yes. We
Yes.
would have been pushing it
We
back.
have more time to digest.
We'd like to have some comments on the design because we didn't have a chance. Like, a lot of the things you're mentioning were brought up by a neighbor that no longer lives here. So I would say about like 60% of your interventions based on the concerns if someone's no longer there. And I think that we should have more of a broad view of why the street is flooding. And then if we have some concerns, we can add that in. Here's our chance to do that. The goal is not to dig up the street and have Aqua dig up the street. And then we have another resolution to focus on flooding and we dig up the street again. And then we have a line that's old and they're gonna say, hey, we're gonna have to dig up 500 feet of a line because we added 2 more inlets. It just seems like it's a definitional problem where we're defining the problem so narrowly that we're not really seeing the forest for the tree.
So Mr. D'Onofrio, what I have to tell you is, this is the forest that I saw, right? So when I did meet with that gentleman who you spoke of some 4 years ago, this was the problem. When this was designed, it was not designed to put storm sewer up and down the street. After hearing what I'm hearing, I don't disagree with you. That's the way I work. That's the way we work. We try to look at problems as a whole, not as a pinpoint. But with meeting with the gentleman who no longer lives here, that was the problem we were alerted to, not additional problems all around. So that being said, I
would like
fully
to,
agree with you.
that's the
I
thing.
fully
I'd
agree with you.
like to work with you. I would like to get the neighbors together and we come up with a broad solution for flooding, as opposed to doing this 3 different times. And I think it would work well. I think you're a really smart engineer. I'm really happy with Commissioner Fari for getting $300,000 for our street. We haven't really had any interventions in decades. And now's our chance to solve this issue once.
Well,
I also saw some of your projects, sorry, Mr. Nursery, I saw some of your other projects because you have a lot of stormwater projects and some of them are like awesome. You have like really comprehensive approach when you meet with neighbor weekly. You also have like softscape solution, for instance, like tree planting to mitigate the water. That's why we worry about the old tree because we want to make sure this tree actually help with flooding. So Maria's old tree is very important for us.
So all I'd like to say is, again, I just want to reiterate, whatever it was 4 years ago, this is the problem we were alerted to. And that's why it's such a pinpoint solution, right? So all the things that are being said are absolutely correct. And as Mrs. D'Onofrio pointed out, if you look online at our other projects, they are very holistic. They are far reaching and use whatever methods we can to address stormwater management. Sometimes it is an infrastructure project. Sometimes it's more than an infrastructure project. We're looking at a floodplain creation project. As Mrs. D'Onofrio mentioned, in North Wayne, we're looking at using tree trenches,
Yeah, that's awesome.
right?
Very
So I don't want you to think we veered left when we were supposed to veer right. We addressed a problem that we were made aware of. All the other things we're talking about tonight, we were not aware of, and this project was not designed to address. So what I know we have, and the reason, just so you know, the reason we have to call the meeting, our Zoom master is the only Zoom master we have, and he has another meeting coming up. So Ian Myers is the rock star, and if we go too far, there's another public meeting for one of the other committees coming on that he has to address. So I'll just close for me. After hearing all that we've heard, and this is great stuff, and we love hearing it, we'll talk internally and we'll talk with the commissioner, and I'm sure the Commissioner Farhi is a huge proponent of the town hall meetings, whether they be in person or Zoom. And we will have another one of these. I'm sure he's going to say, Steve, schedule this, get a letter out and let's schedule it. So now that we know all the various items that concern folks, as well as workers working during COVID, give us a chance to talk internally and look at things and talk with the commissioner and the township manager, Bill White.
Thanks for listening to us.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for everybody that came out. I'll be brief because I know Ian's gonna need the bandwidth here. Yeah, we can definitely schedule another one of these if this is not ideal. Let's find that out. Let's vet that out, flush it out, and we can go from there. But as the engineer said, this was specifically for that ponding. So if there are other issues, we can address them either now or later. But the issue that is on the table is specifically about this ponding. When you fix one problem, you may cause other problems. So it's not like, there's that you can fix this and not expect that there wouldn't be some other issue that arises. So I do want to talk to Steve to see, and Bill and Dennis, and find out what the best way is with this new information and handle it. So that being said, again, I want to thank you, Steve, Ian, wonderful job doing all the Zoom stuff, Dennis, and all the neighbors, and especially you, Mr. D'Onofrio. You were always on top of this. So that's it. So, all right. So we'll be in touch, but we'll kick this around for a couple of days. Nothing's going to happen, and we'll get back to all of you guys. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Ready.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.